This is Hidden Killers Week in Review.
A look back at the most prolific stories of the week.
This is continuing coverage of United States versus Sean Diddy Combs from the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today.
It wasn't the music. It was not the fame. It wasn't even the entourage. The sunglasses indoors or the mogul mystique. What made the federal courtroom in Lower Manhattan feel different on May 12th was the silence. The kind that falls over a room when the stakes are no longer about career damage or headlines, but instead are about the rest of your life. Sean Diddy Combs, seated in a khaki suit with a faint, rehearsed calm, was staring down a jury that would decide whether his legacy is built on music and business acumen or on violence, control, and coercion. This wasn't TMZ. This wasn't a Twitter thread. This was federal court, and not the kind where you pay a fine and go home. This is the kind where you lose decades, minimum. We're going to go into everything that took place today in the courtroom of Sean Diddy Combs. Day number 1 of the federal trial. In the comments, please let me know what you think about what took place in the courtroom today, and be sure to press subscribe if you're new here so you don't miss any of our coverage on this case. We're going to do rundowns like this for you after every day of court, and we'll have them for you as soon as we possibly can once court is done for the day. So be looking for that and press subscribe so you don't miss it. The courtroom today was packed but orderly. Family in the gallery, journalists pressing their pens like scalpels, his children, his mother, all there and watching. And Diddy still trying to play the role. Before the judge walked in, he gave a heart hand gesture to his daughter, a thumbs up, that classic I'm still the man vibe. But once the judge took the bench and the jury filed in, the reality of it hit like a freight train. 12 jurors and 6 alternates chosen after a grueling vetting process. We're about to hear how a hip-hop legend allegedly used his influence, power, and wealth not to inspire, but to exploit. Judge Aaron Submaranian didn't waste time. He reminded the jurors of their duty, of the gravity of the charges, of the fact that fame has no bearing on truth. And then, as smoothly as a needle drops on vinyl, the case began. The government went first. Assistant U.S. Attorney Emily Johnson stood up and, with zero hesitation, told the jury what they were really there to consider. Not whether Sean Combs had a temper, not whether he lived a wild lifestyle, but whether he spent the last 20 years systematically luring women into relationships built on drugs, surveillance, manipulation, and fear. Whether he built an inner circle of enablers to help maintain control, and whether those relationships were actually a front for a long-term pattern of sex trafficking and racketeering. That's what the state is presenting. And from the jump, Johnson laid out a vision of 2 Diddys, just like the 80s television show, My Two Diddys. Remember that one? My Two Diddys? Paul Reiser and Sean Combs, I think. There's the one everyone saw, the guy behind Bad Boy Records, the fashion line, the talk show appearances, the Harlem comeback kid. And then there's the one prosecutors say operated in private, the man who allegedly turned his fame into a trap where women, particularly young women, were pulled in by luxury and attention and then kept there by force, drugs, and blackmail. Johnson didn't bother warming the jury up with subtlety. She said outright, you will hear from victims. You will hear about the freak-offs, multi-day, drug-fueled sex events orchestrated by Combs where women were allegedly coached, controlled, and in some cases, violently coerced into performing for his gratification. You'll see video evidence, hotel surveillance, graphic recordings, photos of bruises, eyewitness accounts, all painting the same picture. This wasn't a lifestyle. It was a criminal enterprise with a publicist. The prosecution focused early on Cassandra Ventura, Cassie, a longtime girlfriend of Combs, whose name has become central to this case. Johnson previewed evidence that included a violent assault in the hotel hallway caught on tape. She told jurors they would hear from Cassie directly, that she would describe what it was like to be inside that world. A world where saying no allegedly came with consequences, where control wasn't emotional, it was logistical. Phones monitored. Movements tracked. Bodyguards involved, and yes, sex acts recorded, not for fun, for leverage. And it didn't end with Cassie. The jury was told they'd hear from the last 3 other women, Jane Doe's, whose stories line up almost too well. Allegations that stretch across decades, cities, and record labels. Accounts of manipulation and fear disguised as intimacy. Johnson told the jury that this case isn't about rough sex or celebrity excess. It's about power. Who had it, who abused it, and who was allegedly destroyed by it. Then came the defense. Tenny Garagos, one of Combs' attorneys, took a different tack. She didn't deny the lifestyle. She didn't even deny the bad behavior. What she tried to do was reframe it. She told the jury this case is not about rape, not about trafficking, not even about violence. It's about consent and grown adults making choices, some bad, some regrettable, but choices nonetheless. She told the jury that, yes, Combs has a temper. He uses drugs. He's no saint, but that's not what's on trial. You don't convict someone in federal court because they were a jerk. You don't lock them up for being a narcissist. You convict someone when a crime has occurred, when evidence shows force, coercion, or fraud. And Garagos told the jury they would see none of that. According to the defense, these women weren't victims. They were participants in Combs' life, his circle, his brand, and in many cases, participants who allegedly benefited financially or socially from proximity to him. She argued that the relationships, even the weird, messy, sexually complicated ones, were mutual, and that it's only now, years later, with the cultural tide turned and lawsuits flying, that these accusations have surfaced in this form. Garagos went further, pointing out that some of the prosecution's central witnesses remained in contact with Combs well after the alleged abuse. Some worked for him again, some asked to come back. That, she argued, isn't coercion, it's free will. And when it came to the term racketeering, the defense called it a stretch bordering on absurd. Garagos reminded jurors that RICO, the law meant to fight organized crime, was not designed for celebrity sex scandals, that there is no crew of armed thugs, no cash for kidnapping network, just bad decisions and messy relationships that have been retrofitted into criminal allegations. She told the jury they'd be bombarded with headlines, sound bites, and moments taken wildly out of context. But at the core, she said, there was no crime, no pattern, no coercion, just a complicated man and even more complicated relationships. The courtroom sat kind of a stunned tension as she wrapped up. It was clear the jury was going to be asked to sort through not just allegations and evidence, but psychology, power dynamics, memory, and money. At 12:40 p.m., the judge recessed for lunch. The jurors stood. The attorneys collected their notes. And Diddy, still calm, still keeping the look, and stood silent, with a silent nod to his family. No outbursts, no visible panic, but this wasn't a music video and nobody was yelling, "Cut!" The camera doesn't stop rolling in federal court, it only gets closer. Because after lunch, the opening salvos would give way to something much harder to explain away: evidence, video, and the first eyewitness to speak under oath about what they saw, they said, what they say they saw behind closed doors. After the lunch break, the courtroom wasn't just settling back into its seats, it was settling into the next phase of the trial. The morning had been all about narratives, legal positioning, opening conversations about the government, about the defense. But once Judge Submaranian returned to the bench at 1:15 p.m., it was time to move from rhetoric to reality. The gloves came off. The video came on, and suddenly this wasn't a story about fame or lifestyle anymore. It was about what jurors could see with their own eyes. The prosecution's first witness of the afternoon was Israel Flores, a former security officer at the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles, now a member of the LAPD. Dressed in uniform, calm and composed, Flores didn't tell a story so much as walk the courtroom through it minute by minute. His testimony centered on an incident from March 5th of 2016, when he was working a shift that would later become a central piece of this federal case. That night, Flores said he received a report from the front desk that a woman was in distress on the 6th floor. When he checked the surveillance monitors, what he saw triggered immediate concern: a man pacing aggressively in a hallway, dressed in nothing but a towel. The woman, identified later as Cassie Ventura, was crouched near the elevator, visibly shaken, trying to put on her shoes, trying to get away. In court, the prosecution played the hotel surveillance video for the jury. No audio, just brutal, silent imagery. The entire room watched as the man, confirmed to be Sean Combs, advanced on Ventura, grabbed her, and then threw her to the floor. He kicked her, dragged her by the hoodie she was wearing, and at one point hurled a decorative vase in her direction. The moments were fast, erratic, controlled only in the way a predator knows what he is doing. It was not a scuffle, it was not a misunderstanding, it was violence. Flores narrated the video calmly, answering each follow-up with measured clarity. When he arrived at the scene moments after the incident, he testified Combs was still in the hallway, still in the towel, still barefoot, and Ventura was in the corner, hunched over, trying not to make eye contact. Her hood was pulled tight, her face was partially hidden, but her fear, he said, was obvious. She told him she wanted to leave. Combs, Flores claimed, told her she wasn't going anywhere. According to Flores, Combs was trying to coax her back into the room, insisting she stay. Ventura, clearly trying to get away, began collecting her things, a purse, a phone, shoes, and prepared to exit. Then came the moment that took the courtroom's breath for a beat. Flores said that as he was preparing to escort Ventura to safety, Combs walked up to him, extended a stack of money, large, noticeable, deliberate, and told him not to tell anyone what he saw. The implication in Flores' mind was clear: keep your mouth shut, and this goes away. Flores declined the money. He testified that he let the cash fall to the floor, told Combs he didn't want it, and later reported the incident to his supervisor. What really struck was what Flores did next. Knowing the hotel's surveillance system automatically deleted footage after a short retention period, and fearing the video might somehow vanish or be suppressed, he took out his phone and recorded the playback directly from the monitor. It was, he said, the only way to make sure there was proof. He showed the recording to his supervisor and held on to it, and now, nearly a decade later, that clip had become part of a federal case. On cross-examination, the defense tried to poke holes. They pointed out that Flores' original written incident report from the 2016 didn't include some of the details he was testifying to now, like Ventura's black eye or Combs explicitly saying, "You're not leaving." They questioned whether the cash offer could have been a gesture to cover damages, a broken vase, for instance. Yeah, it's for the vase, rather than a bribe. Flores held firm. He didn't buckle under question. He didn't stammer or change course. His responses stayed consistent. He remembered the look on Ventura's face. He remembered Combs' stare, what he called devilish, and he remembered the moment the money hit the floor. It wasn't dramatic testimony in the Hollywood sense. It was quiet, but it landed because it didn't ask the jury to imagine anything. It just asked them to watch. Once Flores was excused, the government called their next witness, and the tone shifted again, and this time towards the world that allegedly lived behind the closed doors of Combs' inner circle. Daniel Phillip, a former adult entertainer, took to the stand. He wasn't a household name, but his story reached directly into the heart of the government's allegations. According to Phillip, he was hired multiple times in the early 2010s to engage in sexual acts with Cassie Ventura, with Combs present, observing, directing, and sometimes recording. Phillip described being booked for what he thought was a private party with a woman in a Manhattan hotel room. When he arrived, Cassie answered the door, dressed in red lingerie, wearing a wig and sunglasses. She told him it was her birthday. Then she said her husband wanted to do something special for her. The request was simple at first: rub baby oil on her, see where it goes. But in the corner of the room, Phillip said, there was a man wearing a hoodie and a face covering, watching. At first, he didn't recognize him, but once the man spoke, Phillip realized it was Combs. The situation escalated into sex. Phillip and Combs remained in the corner the entire time, giving instructions on what to do, how to do it, while pleasuring himself. Afterward, Cassie paid him several $1,000s in cash and sent him a follow-up text asking him to come back again. That first encounter became the first of many. According to Phillip, these sessions took place at hotels, private residences, and Combs' own property. The rooms were always carefully staged: candles, baby oil, costumes, the windows blacked out, phones turned off, and always Combs directing, watching, taping. Sometimes Phillip said Combs would ask for his ID before they started. Phillip interpreted that as a message: we know who you are. But the most unsettling part of Phillip's testimony wasn't about sex, it was about violence. He told the jury about one particular incident at Cassie's apartment. He and Cassie were there together. Combs was in another room. Cassie was on her laptop. When Combs called out to her, she didn't respond right away. That's when Combs allegedly lost control. Phillip said Combs stormed in, threw a liquor bottle against the wall, not at her, but close, then grabbed her by the hair and dragged her into a bedroom. From outside the door, Phillip said he could hear slapping sounds and Cassie screaming, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. A moment later, she ran from the room naked and jumped into Phillip's lap, shaking. He said he was terrified, not just for her, but for himself. This wasn't just awkward, it wasn't weird, it felt dangerous. The prosecution didn't have to add much. The room was already silent. The jury watched Phillip describe not just sex parties, but fear, coercion, a kind of psychological control that extended beyond intimacy and into obedience. And all of it, every claim, every description, pointed to the central thesis of the government's case, that this wasn't play, this was power. The defense began its cross-examination near the end of the day, but they didn't get very far. They started by challenging Phillip's employment history, asking whether his work for a male review company included a policy against prostitution. Phillips admitted it did. The implication was clear. If you were breaking one rule, maybe you'd stretch the truth about others. But they'd only just started when court recessed for the day. Judge Submaranian dismissed the jury just after 5 p.m., reminding them once again to avoid the media, avoid conversation, and avoid opinion. Day one ended not with drama, but with a kind of weight that sits in the bones. A video of a beating, a witness describing a bribe, another describing control masked as pleasure. It wasn't about opening statements anymore. It was about what the jury had seen and what they'd heard and what they'd need to carry into the next day. This case wasn't about a metaphor anymore. It was about testimony, evidence. And what happens when the door finally opens? We will find out next. Let us know what you thought about day one in the comments. Love to see that. Be sure to press subscribe, whether you're listening to us on a podcast platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeart, whatever it may be. Hit subscribe, and you won't miss any of our coverage of this case. The breakdowns for you every single day on YouTube. Hit subscribe there too. And like I said, comment. Love to hear what your thoughts are on this case. My name is Tony Brueski. We will talk again real soon.
Craving non-stop true crime updates? Press subscribe now and get the latest cases, analysis, and expert commentary delivered straight to your feed. Only from the Hidden Killers podcast and True Crime Today.